Hello and welcome to day two of AccelByte's virtual GDC. And the topic we are covering is kind of how to do cross-platform with our solution, with our game platform. Uh, so, real quick, I will cover who AccelByte is. You might not have the most up-to-date information, or you may not have heard of us before. So I will quickly cover that. My name is Shane. I'm a technical director here at AccelByte. I've been with the company for about a year, and have a background in Backend as a service for probably about 4.5, 5 years or so, give or take. But AccelByte as a company we provide a game backend platform that you can use to basically power your game to do whatever you want. It's been built by experts from places like Epic, EA, Microsoft, Ubisoft, GameSparks, and more. So we have quite a vast pool of knowledge to pull from when it comes to how we should be building these kind of services and how they should work. And basically, we are a one-stop shop for microservices. So if you were to start using AccelByte tomorrow, you would have the ability to use user accounts. You'd be able to manage all your users. You'd have e-commerce, social, matchmaking, player profiles, statistics on both a global service level and a player level, cloud saves for your players, telemetry, analytics, server orchestration, crash reporter, and quite frankly, a ton of other services as well. But we're also keenly aware that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for backend as a service. There's no way every single game on the planet Earth uses the exact same flow for how their users are supposed to use leaderboards or matchmaking. So we have that built out of the box. Is we're going to talk to you. We're going to make sure that everything is going to work the way you expect it to work. We're going to enable you to make your game kind of the most unique from your perspective. We're going to make your game work the way you want it to and how you feel it should work. We're going to help you to accomplish that. So that's in a real quick nutshell what AccelByte is. And to give you a bit more information as well, again, if you were to start using AccelByte tomorrow, well, first of all, in order for that to happen, you'd have to start a dialogue with us. So if you go to our lovely new website, accelbyte.io, you can click this Ask Us Anything button down here, and you can start the dialogue, start the conversation. And generally, we'll just try and get to know you as a developer. We'll try and get to know your game or your games. We're not just a good solution for developers of all sizes. We also could help empower publishers and have done in the past. So we'd start a dialogue. We'd try and figure out what the best way to approach this is and what the best way to consume our services are. You don't have to use absolutely everything that comes with the product. You could pick and choose if you wish. You might be a small developer. You might not see yourself publishing your own games. You might only want to publish your games on Steam or on Xbox or PlayStation. But you can totally do that, and we'll help you. You can just use our login services. You can just use our matchmaking. You can cut out all the rest of it. It's totally dependent on what suits you best, and we'll help you. We'll help guide you down that path to ensure that you are successful and that your game is successful. Because if you're successful, then we're successful, and that's kind of the approach we're trying to take with all this fun stuff. So what are the key things before we jump into our cross-platform, how we're going to set that up and what it means? Chances are you've already seen our VP of Tech, Raymond Arafianto's talk on Is Your Game Cross-Platform Ready? And I will be kind of touching on some of the points he made, as well as I've borrowed some of the slides he's made just to help highlight some points, because it can be quite a technically challenging topic. But back on what I was saying, what makes AccelByte kind of unique for the most part in some of these backend as a service providers is we are a single tenant provider. So what happens is you sign up for AccelByte Cloud, and instead of having your services running on a cluster with 100 other games or 200 to 500 other games all at once, everything your brand is on the backend side is running on its own individual instance for a word to use. So what that means is you have your game, you've gone live, you've been live for a few weeks, and then another game comes along And if you're on a shared instance, a multi-tenant instance, and they have a massive spike in users, that puts stress on the server. On a multi-tenant instance, your game can actually be affected by that. Login may go down, requests might not be fulfilled because the server's under stress from this other game that's come along and is stressing the servers out. But on a single tenant instance, that's not the case. You can be rest assured that all of the data and all of the calls being made are specifically for your game and nobody else's. So, we will again also work with you to help ensure that if there's going to be a launch or a sale or something, we can help stand up and make sure that the service is 100% ready to go for whatever you're going to throw at it. Another cool thing as well with the way we try and give the service or provide the service is you own all the data on the platform. And I can't stress enough, like the platform is generating data and you are the one with the sole access to that, and you decide how that data is being used. So it's another good thing where, you might be signing up for a third-party provider and paying them money, but you don't necessarily own the full tech or all of the user data that goes along with it. And then final note, with AccelByte Cloud, you're basically running a platform as a service, and we're hosting it. We are running it. We are doing all the live DevOps. But we also give you the option that, let's say your first game or your second game is super successful and you feel like you could probably start hiring and running all this stuff yourselves. Well, we're more than happy to have another conversation with you and give you the keys to your kingdom, so it will. And you'll be able to host it and run it yourselves, and you can kind of run away with it if you wish. But we hope you'll still kind of work with us and we'll work with you to keep the service up to date with new features and just in general, keep the relationship going. So in a very broad nutshell, that is what AccelByte is. So on to the topic at hand, which is how do you do cross-platform functionality, both kind of in general and with our services. So again, in the talk that we streamed about 30 minutes ago, you can look it up online. It's Is Your Game Cross-Platform Ready by Raymond Arafianto. It was on the GDC sessions yesterday, and we've been streaming it on our channel every day as well. But Raymond makes some very important points, and I won't go into the whole thing again because we'd just be repeating ourselves, but I will bring up the three kind of key cross-play, cross-platform things you need to be aware of and how we'd accomplish that with AccelByte. So the first one is, of course, cross-play, and that is you're going to launch your multiplayer game, and whether your friends are on Xbox or PlayStation or PC or Android or wherever they may be, you will be able to matchmake with your friends and play with them, and as if there was no difference between the platform that they were running on. So the way this works is there is generally a centralized matchmaking service with a centralized user data, and that is how the cross-platform can work. And then if you're on Xbox, you are searching for Xbox users, but if you've invited your friend who's on Switch, you're now expanding that search for users who are on Xbox and Switch. So that's crossplay. It's probably the most common form of cross-platform at the moment. It's getting more common for sure. But, hopefully in the future, and it seems like the rules around how crossplay and who's allowed to do crossplay are getting more lax as the weeks go on. So I feel like in probably about a year or two, it might not be this kind of, we are definitely not doing that. Instead, it definitely seems to be going the way of, we definitely want you to be able to do crossplay. So the second part of cross-platform stuff is cross-progression, and this is the ability to basically do cross-saving. So in other words, I have played The Witcher 3, for instance, to use a real-world example, on Steam, and now I'm able to buy the game again on Nintendo Switch and transfer my save between Switch and PC back and forth. This also went under the term transferring a few years ago when Hideo Kojima did Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. But it lets you continue your gaming progress regardless of platform. So you could be at home and you have a really killer gaming PC, and you're playing your game there, and then you're traveling for business or whatever reason, you bring your Switch and you can continue your game on your Switch, and then you finally get to where you're going and you prefer to use a computer, so you go onto your less powerful laptop and your progress follows you on all of these platforms. So that's another way of doing kind of cross-platform stuff. And then another one is cross-buy, and this is a bit of a trickier one, and I won't really tackle it during this call because I think both cross-play and cross-progression will take up ample time to describe and play. But cross-buy is basically, if I were to buy, Xbox are doing it quite well. If I buy the game on Xbox or Windows, I can log into the opposite platform and be able to play the game there. So I buy the game on Xbox, eventually I buy a Windows PC, and I can play the same game and carry my progression over there as well. It's a bit more difficult to do out of the box right now because the platforms are still quite closed off. You can't just hit an API on Xbox and grant a player an entitlement. But it's something that is changing, albeit slowly, but we're getting there. So let's quickly discuss how crossplay works on console, or how a non-crossplay title works on computers these days. And to help illustrate this, I'm going to borrow my colleague's slide from his talk that was on the channel 30 minutes ago. But effectively, each version of your game, whether it's on Steam or PlayStation, is running in its own self-contained platform of services. So if you're using just the Steam services, your game is launched from Steam. It authenticates with Steam through the identity, and then it pulls the player profile in, and then you want to matchmake with your friends. So you jump into a party with your friends who are also on Steam, and then you go back and you matchmake and you find other Steam players, and you start the process again. Steam does not talk to PlayStation, and PlayStation does not talk to Steam, and Xbox and Nintendo. And again, this could change in the future, but right now this is how this works. And if you go to PlayStation, you'll see that it has the exact same set of services that Steam does, but they all behave very differently. So PlayStation has no concept of who the user is on Steam. They're not really interested in kind of bridging that gap to pull that information in. If you take a real world example, Street Fighter V launched on PlayStation and Steam and had crossplay enabled. But you had to use a completely different user ID than what the person's PSN ID was and what the person's Steam ID was. And the reason for this is they were actually using their own kind of Capcom backend, let's say. So this is what that platform level backend would look like. And again, thank you, Raymond, for the awesome slides. So using AccelByte to accomplish this, I will put our screens side by side. So you have a centralized platform, the single tenant platform that AccelByte is running for you, your own white label platform. So game company platform is what it's called. And you can have users create accounts through Steam or through PlayStation or through the player portal, which if we jump onto it here, you can have users create accounts and log in. And if I log in with Steam, make sure I have my phone for tokens, and if not, we can just log in with email. There it is. So we can log in with Steam here, and I'll get my code and I'll type it in, and I'm trusting everyone on the internet right now to not steal my account. Thank you very much. So we are logging into the platform with Steam and accept the terms and agreements, and we have our player profile on our centralized server. So what this means is we have a central server that Steam isn't aware of and PlayStation isn't aware of, but our centralized backend is aware of those platforms. So our users live in our centralized platform. And then what happens is I can open up Steam here and go to my library and find our game, which is called Light Fantastic. And I can click play on Light Fantastic here, and it will open up and bring our window over. And what's happening here is we are logging our user in using their Steam ID. So effectively, our game has the AccelByte SDK. The SDK is contacting the AccelByte central backend, and then preparing for logging users in. And Our game also has the Steamworks SDK. The Steamworks SDK takes a token from the Steam app that's running. It gives it to the AccelByte SDK. AccelByte consumes that token with a Steam endpoint. And then if the token was valid, we get information about the user. And then we use that information to log that user in seamlessly. So as you can see there, I didn't have to type in my email address or password, much like I logged into the player portal with the same details. So Steam doesn't know we're contacting this third-party platform. And other than giving us the user information about this particular user, which was the Steam ID and the Steam username, Steam is unaware of what's going on. So on our centralized server platform, we have all of the same feature set that PlayStation or Steam has. So we have identity, we have friends, we have party, matchmaking, stats, cloud save, all of these things. And what that enables us to do is if we say, okay, I want to play with a friend who's on PlayStation, I can click on my friends list here. I can see Joseph, it was online 11 days ago. Joseph could be playing on his Android phone or his PlayStation. But it's saying, I'm pulling this information from our centralized backend. And Joseph would have gone through the same login process using Google or Apple or the PlayStation ID to log into his game when he first played it. And I can invite Joseph to join my game. I can search for other users, but all these users exist on the platform. They've all logged into the platform at some stage. They've all played the game at some stage. And then when I have those users, I can add them to my party. And then I can say, okay, I want to find a game with players in particular. So I'll click versus one-on-one. And again, this matchmaking is happening on our backend. PlayStation, we're not using PlayStation's matchmaking. We're not using Steam's matchmaking. We're using our centralized matchmaking service. And then the matchmaking happens, and I won't find a match because I think I'm the only one playing our demo game at the moment. But the matchmaking happens, and then it contacts a dedicated server running on our backend, and it puts the user and the friends he's matched with onto that dedicated server, and they play their game. Now, that's kind of a simplified way to describe what's actually happening, but it's in essence you're just taking the information that these platforms are giving you and running it on the platform you are using. So straightforward enough. That's kind of how you would matchmake your players together. So just clicking through the slides that Raymond has here, I'll give them a refresh real quick. But cross-platform is straightforward. Just you're not relying on these third-party platform identity systems or matchmaking systems, but you're using AccelBytes or your own, no matter which service you're using. And if you look at the solutions here, you can kind of click through and see user account management and how that's all hosted there. One thing to keep in mind, the reason cross-platform, or well, not the reason, but cross-platform kind of exists and has existed for years, even if it hasn't actually been allowed by players to use it. So on our backend, you'd have your matchmaking running, and on Xbox, you would just filter out the games that are on PlayStation or on Nintendo or on PC. So the only thing that's actually really happening here is if you have a third party or a centralized server of your own, you would have previously just been filtering out all the games that are happening on any of these platforms. But now you can say, if you're using the Fortnite kind of scenario of I'm on PC, I'm playing with my brother or sister or friend who's on their phone. Normally a PC person wouldn't match with a phone person, but in this case, we're going to have the phone person match with the PC players. You can kind of relax and generate rules based on all of the variables that are at play with cross-platform working. It's not super easy to get working, but once you have a flow in mind and you build out your rule set, the matchmaking is very easy to set up with custom rules on the back end. And as you can see in the flow for matchmaking that Raymond has provided us here, the user is playing your game. They are logging in through the authentication service. They are then matchmaking. They're joining the multiplayer session that is running on a dedicated server outside of the platform holder environment. And then once that multiplayer session is over, they're being put back to the base client game that's running on Xbox, Steam, or PlayStation. and using those services. So matchmaking, in a nutshell, it's once you have your own third-party platform, it's incredibly easy to do cross-platform. If you don't have it, it's quite next to impossible, unless you have a deal with some of these third-party platforms in place. So the next thing, I will skip over the fulfillment flow, but this is something that's still kind of a touchy subject on the cross-platform side of things, where right now, if you're buying an item on Steam, Steam gets a 30% cut. If you're buying something on PlayStation, they get a percentage cut. In fact, I might be wrong on those percentages. They have changed. So generally, if you buy something on Steam, PlayStation isn't super happy to let the players use it on PlayStation because they didn't get paid. They didn't get their cut of that. So what happens is there are loopholes. If you take a look at Hearthstone, for example, you can have Hearthstone on PC, you can have it on PlayStation, you can have it on Android, and you can buy items on Android or straight from Blizzard, and the card packs and whatever the virtual currency is, I can't remember, will appear on the other accounts you're using. But again, it's something that isn't super well supported, just because the platform holders still have a bit of a vice grip on how that stuff works. But it is, again, totally doable, and it's just a matter of, you could have your game using AccelByte, you could be platform ready, and then once those rules start to relax, you could actually start then allowing users to use their items elsewhere. But the one very interesting thing is you could have a bit more of a relaxed rule, whereas on PlayStation, I believe the news at the time was, if you marked your account as a PlayStation account, you couldn't play on one of the other platforms. That's a very strict rule, but if you have your own platform, you make the rules. So you could allow players to have their account on PC and on PlayStation, but you could just not allow them to use those specific items on those accounts. So again, it's kind of very useful for you to control how you allow those things to happen by having your own third-party platform as well. I will skip down to our analytics part of things. So not the analytics, apologies. So account leaking is also another important part of cross-platform, and the way we've already seen that in our player portal demo where I logged in with Steam. The way you kind of want this to happen is you want your users to have a seamless flow from purchasing your game to getting in the game. Players get very annoyed by having to fill out forms and agree to legal terms and all this stuff. It is kind of things that have to be done. So again, with AccelByte, we can use those logins to generate an OAuth type flow where you are connected to the AccelByte service, you consume a token, and the token validates the user, and that user is now playing in your game. But they've also created what we call a headless account on the back end. And they're generally what you want to do if you're trying to tie all these users, because technically, if user A plays on PlayStation and they log in with their PSN ID, and then that same user for some reason buys your game again on Steam, if we don't have kind of a central account to tie these users to, they are in essence two separate users, but we want to be able to, enable this user to use the same data across their accounts for cross progression, cross saving, but we also want to, have that information that we know that this is a single user, and we can be able to kind of more effectively market and manage the relationship between this player and the games that they are playing. So you've seen games then who will do the seamless login with PSN or Steam or Xbox, and then after a while or in their menu somewhere, they'll have an option for, hey, why don't you upgrade this account to a full AccelByte account, or whatever your brand name is, like a Telltale or a 2K account, that kind of thing. And what that allows you to do is you can then say, okay, well, this PSN ID is now attached to this specific email, and that email account now is no longer a headless account. It's an account that has details about this player. So you can link your PSN ID to an email, you can get their date of birth, you store extra information about them, and then when they go on PC, and you can say, okay, well, maybe you should link your Steam account to your main account, and now you know that this email is tied to both this PSN ID and this Steam ID. And this is very important for stuff like cross progression. So what that's going to enable with cross progression is, okay, we know Steam user Backpain Man, which is me, is tied to Shane at AccelByte.net. So if I log into my Nintendo Switch with my Switch ID, and then I link my Switch ID to this particular account, I can then go, okay, I can query the cloud save, which we also support on our player profile, stats, and cloud. I can use this information to then say, okay, well, this player has a game save on Steam or on their PC version, and we can update that game save locally to the Nintendo Switch, and then transfer that save file back again once they've finished their remote session on whichever device they wish to transfer it from. So the account linking is a very important step to this whole process. And even when it comes to matchmaking, the account linking is important because, as I mentioned before with the Street Fighter scenario, and you can see it now as well with Call of Duty Modern Warfare, is I go by Backpain on Steam. On PlayStation, I have a different username, and then I may even use a different email address tied to all of those three. So if you were talking about our initial diagram here of how the platforms talk to each other, Steam Backpain has no idea who my Finstern is on PlayStation, which is my user ID there. So we are using that central email address, shane@accelbyte.net, to be that kind of source of truth of, we're looking for a third player in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. So instead of searching for Backpain or searching for Finstern on PlayStation, I can type in the email address or the platform ID or the platform username of that particular person and invite them to the match. And whether they're playing on PlayStation, Steam, or elsewhere, they will get a notification popping up with a toast saying, hey, this other player has invited you to play their game. So very useful. Gets complicated when you're dealing with a lot of platforms, but the core of that is you have a centralized server that has all this information that you're then using all of these other platforms to kind of tie information about this player together in one kind of net of information that you have about a user, so that when that user wants to do a specific thing, either by themselves or with other players on another service, you are acting as the source of truth. Your platform is acting as the source of truth for all of this information, as well as doing the work of matching these players together and retrieving their save files from the cloud. So that's kind of it for kind of doing cross-platform. It is always trickier than it seems. If you have your game running on a PlayStation or PC and it's running on mobile devices, there is differences in how they actually perform at the game engine level. But the one thing we've tested with our platform is that our SDK works on all of these different services. The underlying functions they are doing is purely REST calls, and then for some of the social and multiplayer stuff, we are using WebSockets. But the SDK itself isn't going to be an issue when you're integrating this information. It's kind of the trickier part lies within syncing up all of these different systems together. But once you have that single source of truth, you can kind of easily matchmake and manage all your friends through that core service, and then pull that information in and out as you need to when your players are playing your game. So yeah, I guess that's probably going to cover this kind of theoretical discussion of how you would accomplish the cross-platform using our solution. So really quick, we'll cover it again. Initially, you'll want your core platform running on its own, separate from these other entities. You will integrate user account management that will then link these separate accounts for players at this central point. You will then use our social services for finding friends, for chatting to people. For then you have your friends and you will do matchmaking, and then you will matchmake. You will connect to a dedicated server that is not running on any of these third-party or platform holding services, and your players will play, and then they can go back and they can just use the game on the individual console itself. And it's very similar again for cloud saves, where once you have that central source of truth of your player, you can check the cloud save if it was last uploaded from Steam, download it to Switch if it was last uploaded from Switch, download it to PlayStation when they log on there, and so on and back and forth. And that kind of puts it all together, makes it sound much easier, than kind of trying to manage all these third-party platforms sending data to each other, which is almost next to impossible until hopefully it gets easier in the future. But for now, you can build your own and make sure it works exactly how you think and how you feel it should work. So with that said, I'm going to end this, and thank you again